What is going on, traders? We got a lot to talk about. It's going to be a pretty interesting video. In this video, we are going to talk about the possibility of a top being near. It's not me calling a top or anything for you guys who just read thumbnails and don't actually listen to videos. This is me simply giving you guys an idea on where a top can be. So before we start, like, subscribe, comment your thoughts below. Let's get into the video. So right now we are looking at the ES and we are looking at the weekly time frame. Now, for those of you who've been watching my channel for quite some time, since like last year, I did make a video implying that a top was here, right here. Now, you don't have to believe me, but the video literally is called The Top, somewhat like this video, right? And in that video, I pretty much called a top or implied that a top was near, and about a day or so later, the market ended up tanking towards the downside, as you guys can see here. Now, again, this is not me calling a top or anything in this particular video. This is me simply saying that we are getting near this trend line here where we usually top at, right? So here we topped, we played games for quite some time, but eventually we ended up dropping towards the downside. Here we got pretty close, tanked towards the downside, and then we got bought back up, and now we're doing, well, not now, but we did this little roller coaster here. In fact, if we zoom in, right, we ended up forming some type of double top here. We had our neckline here at around 5,800, and then we broke down. This is when we got pretty much all that tariff news and things like that, and then we ended up pumping back towards the upside. And so I do imagine that if we are going to continue towards the upside, which I do believe is going to happen, we'll get into that in a bit, that I imagine that we're going to head back towards this trend line here at around 6,300, more or less, on the ES. And that is where I imagine we are going to probably see some type of topping process, right? Now, it's not to say that we are just going to head straight here and then, immediately tank. We can do something like this. We just play games for a month or two, who knows, before actually seeing some type of drop towards the downside. I mean, every time we got up here, it wasn't necessarily we just immediately rejected. Every time we got down here, we played games a lot, right? So I would encourage you guys to mark this on your charts if you do believe in TA. If you don't, there's just, I don't even know why you're here, but just ignore what I'm saying. But again, I do imagine that this is somewhere around 6,300. We're probably going to see a lot of turbulence, maybe a lot of games being played. Right now, it's important to note, right, that this is not guaranteed to happen, right? We are still below a key level we talked about in the last video, 6,150, and this is why I still urge to be cautious, right? Because I'm sure somebody's going to be in the comments like, oh, we didn't dip, they're expecting everything I say to happen immediately, right? I still believe that you should be cautious in this area. Now, I'm not calling for a crash or a correction or anything. I just do believe that the fact that we're at 6,150, the fact that we're still below 22,500 on the NASDAQ, that you still should be very much cautious because a dip is very much possible. And I think it makes sense. I mean, we've been pumping pretty much nonstop. So I do think the market at some point in time will want to cool down before heading higher. Again, before heading higher. And I do think it's very much possible that we could continue to head higher. Well, not, I want to say continue, but dip and then head higher. Okay. I do believe that the market will want to gather some more liquidity before we pump further back towards the upside, right? So that's what we're looking at when it comes to the ES. Your key level is obviously 6,150, and if we mark it out, you can see it clear as day. I tell you guys to zoom out, look to the left all the time. Right here where these guys are, you actually had a triple top here, which is actually insane and really clean, actually. So you topped here, right? You had a top here, you had another top here, you rejected multiple times off this trend line. So we're going to need some pretty, I imagine we're going to need some pretty good news to really break above this level. So if we don't break above this level, right, and we reject from here, I don't think anyone should be surprised. It's a very, very tough level. When you're talking about breaking above things like a triple top or even a double top, you need a major catalyst for it to happen. So I'm not guaranteeing that we're going to, reject from here. I would just say be very, very much careful. We do have GDP coming in tomorrow. We also have unemployment data coming in tomorrow as well. As you guys can see, at 8:30 Eastern time, we have final GDP and unemployment claims. I haven't looked if we had anything else. We have FOMC members speaking, nothing too crazy outside of that. So that is something you definitely want to pay attention to. I do believe that GDP is not going to come in good, but I don't think it's going to be a market crash or anything like that, but we'll see. I don't think anyone should be surprised that GDP actually comes in bad, but the market usually prices these things in, so I could be wrong. Okay, I can absolutely be wrong. That's something I wouldn't even care about being wrong when it comes to that, because news is just really random these days. So again, ES, pay attention to 6,150. Let's get into the triple Qs and the SPY. So when you're looking at the triple Qs here, right, triple Qs, again, just like we're looking at on the NASDAQ, you are above a key level, which is 540, 541 actually. You're kind of having a hard time staying above this level. So as you guys can see here, we rejected here, right? We rejected here, and we're kind of having a hard time staying above this level. Now, if we go to the 4-hour time frame, you're somewhat mounting it, but it's not a convincing mount. I mean, you zoom in, it's not a very convincing mount, right? You don't have them big bullish candles that you really want to see, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Maybe we're just waiting on GDP, maybe we're waiting on unemployment claims. But again, this is where you want to be careful, because you really want to see bulls step in, and you're kind of seeing bears just slowly trickle in here. Now, this is something I introduced to Discord members. This is our buy indicator, by the way. It's exclusive to Discord members. Eventually, I will make it public. Then you guys will be able to buy it in the comments below. But as you guys can see, it doesn't repaint or anything. But one thing I was letting Discord members know, that if you're talking about the projected move of our buy indicator here, do your own due diligence, do your own research, of course, as always. Don't go by what my indicator says, because this is fairly new to you guys if you're not in the Discord. But one thing I did say is that triple Qs can head towards 544. That is the projected measured move for this buy indicator here, and we hit that target, right? We hit that target like right on the dot. So I mean, even if you look at replay mode, right, no repaint or anything, just stays there, and you guys see we hit that target right on the dot. So it's not to say that we're topping here or anything like that. It's just more so saying that it is very much possible that we do one of these moves and see some type of cool down effect here, where we can see, where is it? Here we go. Sorry. Where we can see a move back towards about the low 530s, 534, 532, before continuing back towards the upside. And I think that makes sense, because you're kind of seeing the triple Qs curl over here, right? You're seeing this slowly curl over. And so I do imagine that you're going to see a dip sometime in the near future before continuing back towards the upside. And historically, the last 2 weeks of June are bearish, and then July is like extremely bullish. So it will make sense. All right, if we're basing things off history and kind of what we're seeing on the charts, it's very much possible. So that's what I'm looking at for the triple Qs. Your key levels here is obviously 544, 545 psych level. You get above that, then 550 is definitely on the table. Think it's a no-brainer. As far as downside goes, 539, you're seeing the triple, you saw the triple Qs retest 539, is having a hard time. I want to say having a hard time, but you're seeing bears have a hard time break below that key level. So if you get below 539, then obviously you're looking at about 537, 536, and then your key level of all levels is 534, 532. Those are your main levels to pay attention to when it comes to downside. You manage to give those up, then you might want to worry a little bit. All right, so again, you are seeing some type of curl over effect here. You do have a bearish engulfing candle on the 2-hour time frame as well. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to play out right away. Sometimes bearish candles take a while to play out, so you consolidate here for quite some time before breaking down. Again, GDP is tomorrow. Maybe that's the catalyst that really makes things, gives us that pullback that we really want. At least I really want. I would love to see a pullback so I can enter a lot of trades that I'm looking at, because there's a lot of juicy trades that I'm looking at, especially when it comes to semiconductors. I don't think semiconductors are done at all. All right, so SPY. So when it comes to the SPY, if we look at the weekly time frame in regards to the whole top thing, I kind of forgot about that subject. But when you're looking at the SPY here, right, again, you have this trend line, and this is what when I made that video about the possible top happening, it happened like immediately, almost the next day. And so again, if we're talking about new highs and all-time highs, which I do think is very much on the table here, but I don't think it's going to like happen right away. If it does, that's great. But if we are going to continue to head higher, right, and let's say we are going to look at all-time highs or new highs, if we're talking about the top of this trend, you're talking about a move all the way to 630. 630, 620 minimum. Okay, pretty crazy stuff. All right, now again, I don't think we're just gonna pump all the way up to that. Obviously, you might get some dips along the way, and this is why I'm pretty much urging you guys, just like I said in the last video, nothing has changed from the last video, to be cautious, because you just ended up right back where you started, right? You had various stocks do their own thing, but ultimately when you're looking at the SPY and triple Qs, you're right back where you started. So you didn't really do anything, right? Unless you traded individual semiconductors, right? Like NVDA or, even Tesla. And so if we are talking about some downside from here, right, I would imagine that we're going to retest at minimum 600, okay, 600 before potentially heading higher. All right, I also don't like this wick here, but I'm not going to overthink it. It's just something to pay attention to. But ultimately, this just seems like a liquidity grab. If anything, it seems like institutions were exercising their call options, so we'll see. But yeah, there's not too much to worry about, I guess. But if anything, as far as downside goes, if we're looking at a dip, if we're looking for some type of liquidity grab before we potentially head higher, I would look for a move towards 600. Okay, towards 600, and then you have a lot of turbulence here, so it's going to be tough to like really break down. So 600 on the SPY is what I'm looking at, and for the triple Qs, 534, 532 if we are looking at a possible, buy the dip scenario. All right, so again, when we're talking about a top, right, SPY can head as high as about 630, maybe even higher, right? Maybe we create, if we dip or consolidate here, we can easily create more space, right? We could just do one of these or something, and then we just maybe even go higher than 630, right? So it's looking like a really good, I guess, second quarter. I do imagine third and fourth quarter, you're probably going to see a market correction or crash. You're probably going to see tariffs really affect things, right? I think we're supposed to have like more information on tariffs in July. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there. But yeah, I mean, as far as the SPY goes, if you're talking about a top, if we're talking about new highs, you can head as high as 620, 630, right? So that leads me to talk about a particular stock here, because I want to talk about Apple. So when it comes to Apple, first off, I hate Apple. I'm probably never going to trade this thing again because it's so annoying. I mean, it's so annoying. Now, we do have a buy signal here on Apple, as you guys can see in the past. It's very much played out because it followed the rules. We do have a strategy and a rule to how we play this. But when you're looking at Apple, it's forming the biggest consolidated inverse head and shoulders pattern ever. I mean, you see it here. You got this massive shoulder here forming, right? You have this head here, and you're doing the same thing over here. Okay, you're doing the same thing. So Apple is consolidating, and remember what I told you guys before. The longer a stock or whatever you're looking at consolidates, the bigger the upcoming move. So I do think Apple at some point in time is going to squeeze and is going to head towards that 220 gap fill. All right. Now our Discord bot did alert, right? I'm not gonna look it up because it was like a few days ago, but the Discord bot did alert 210 calls for July 18th. Okay, yeah, July 18th. I believe that's correct. So our Discord bot did alert July 18th to 10 calls, right? That institutions are in that. So we'll see how those play out. We are in Apple calls, but the longer this consolidates, the longer this shoulder keeps forming, the better. Okay, as long as Apple stays above 199, I think it's safe. If you want to take a low risk trade, do what you want. Ultimately, it's not financial advice or anything, but if I want to take a low risk trade, I would set my stop to 199, like a real tight stop at 199. If you want a more loose stop, maybe you have more capital, 196 is your key level to the downside, further to the downside. But ultimately, I think Apple is going to eventually see some crazy upside. So this is why I think the market is not necessarily ready to correct or crash, simply because of Apple, right? Unless Apple just really gives up like 190, I don't think the market is. I think the market is going to, I guess, correct, crash and burn, whatever you want to say, on once Apple is done making this move towards the upside, right? Right now it's just milking traders as long as possible. I mean, 220 is not even a limit here. I mean, Apple can honestly head much higher. You manage to get above 225, this thing is so illiquid towards the 250s. Like, it's insane. So I do think, Apple is going to go ballistic. I think Apple is the sign that the market is not yet ready to drop. Like, and when I say drop, I mean like tank, like correct. Like, you talk about SPY heading towards, some crazy levels like 580, 560. I don't think that's the case just yet. As long as Apple stays above those key levels, I think the market is pretty much safe. Now, again, can we see dips, right? Can we see a dip on the SPY towards 600? Can we see a dip on the triple Qs towards 530s? Absolutely. But again, until I see Apple really give up like some major levels, I don't think the market is necessarily going to crash and burn. Now, if there is a world where Apple does the inverse of the market, right? That's happened plenty of times before, and it's very much possible now. So I could be wrong on that part, right? I could be wrong that the market is not ready to dump or anything like that. I can absolutely be wrong there, and that's fine. But there is a world where Apple, does do the inverse of the market sometimes, where you'll see semiconductors such as NVDA tank towards the downside, and Apple will pump towards the upside, sort of as a safe haven, right? So it's very much possible, right? That's very much possible. So I don't want you guys marrying the idea that, Apple, I mean, not Apple, but the market just can't drop because of Apple. I don't want us to marry that idea. But if we're assuming that the market, that Apple is somewhat following the market, which is not really doing, it's kind of doing its own thing. But if we're assuming that, then I do imagine that Apple is just waiting on its own news catalyst before pumping towards the upside. But again, there's a world where NVIDIA can tank and then Apple is treated as a safe haven and pumps towards the upside. All right. But point being, guys, in case that's confusing, I know that was kind of confusing. Plain and simple, I do think as long as Apple holds above 199, this thing is bullish and can very much squeeze towards the upside as long as you consolidate here. The longer you consolidate here, I do believe the bigger the move. Okay, so I have a tight stop loss at 199, and then I would just revisit it at, if it goes much lower than 199, then I will revisit it at around 196. But ultimately, I do think Apple has a lot of, not one, I would say 197 actually. I do think Apple has a lot of potential for like a major squeeze. Okay, so we'll see. All right, so it leads me to talk about NVIDIA. So back to the whole top conversation, right? So if we are going to continue towards the upside, as you guys can see here, one thing I told you guys is if you roll back into a pattern, chances are you're going to continue in that direction. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean, now this rising wedge did play out. The short projected term move did play out on this thing, right? But NVIDIA rolled back into this pattern on the weekly time frame. So I do think NVIDIA can continue to head higher, obviously with some dips along the way. Maybe you see a dip towards about the low 140s, hit this dip right here, 144, maybe 140, and then you can start heading towards 170. I do, again, if you correlate this with what I said with the SPY and ES topping, the SPY topping at around 620, 630, and the ES topping around 6300, it's kind of lining up, right? At least I think so, right? So I do think there's a world where NVIDIA can see 170. It's officially made new highs. So congratulations if you traded NVIDIA to the upside. Maybe you listened to what I said in the last few videos where I said NVIDIA looks like it wants to head towards previous highs, if not new highs, towards 155. And even our buy indicators showed this, right? We had a, where'd it go? There was a buy signal here. Oh, I changed the settings, sorry. But there was a buy signal, trust me, bro. But there was a buy signal here actually. Oh, never mind. But there was a buy signal. My Discord members are hilarious. That's why I kind of clicked off that, because I'd be scared of what they be saying sometimes. But ultimately, when it comes to NVIDIA, I'm just laughing at this random guy playing basketball as a gift. But when you're talking about NVIDIA, right, it's very much possible 170 is on the table, guys. Very much possible. Okay, you are starting to get above these guys. That's cause for a squeeze. All right, and I've talked about this. I preached about this so many times. These guys right here, these cocaine bears here, you're starting to get above them. If NVIDIA continues this, you're talking about a short squeeze. Okay, and you're talking about a move towards 170. All right, so best to wait to see what happens tomorrow, right? GDP, unemployment claims, maybe it's a bull trap, whatever the case may be. This NVIDIA can easily dump from here. But I mean, this is a very strong daily candle. Very, very strong daily candle. All right, so just wait for news. Wait 30 minutes into open. That's what I do. I wait 30 minutes after the news before I start trading, just to see how the market digests things. But you might squeeze these guys out, and the market could continue to head higher. All right, so we'll see. All right, NVIDIA. I mean, semiconductors they're so strong, man. They're just so strong. They just look so insanely powerful right now. I mean, AMD. AMD. If AMD continues this, 160, 160, 160. That's all I really have. Again, you have my buy signal, or buy indicator right here, signaling that this thing is going to go towards the upside. You have this inverse head and shoulders pattern, right? You do replay mode. You see that this thing does not repaint at all. Not once does it repaint. Okay, so insane stuff. Inverse head and shoulders pattern. You broke the neckline. AMD, I would love for AMD to at least retest 133. It may not happen, but I would love for this thing to retest 133, and I'm all in for that move to 160. I would love for this to happen, but we'll see. I mean, judging by how Nvidia is looking, it's a tough call. And so that leads me to talk about SOXX. Because in my last video, I showed you guys there was a buy signal on a weekly time frame for SOXX. And this buy signal has yet to play out. All right, I should never change my settings. I changed my settings on the indicator, but regardless, there was a buy signal here, and it was showing that SOXX can head towards 242. So it's possibly more upside for semiconductors, and obviously that's good for the market. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to dip for triple Qs or SPY, and I'm not saying it has to happen tomorrow. What I'm saying is that you just want to be cautious for that to happen between tomorrow and Friday. You have 2 more days left in the week, right? So if Nvidia manages to somehow get to 170 by the end of this week, be careful. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. Be careful. All right, so just be cautious, guys. Be cautious. You know, trim profit as always. That's what we do. We trim profit. You know, we make about a good 20-40%. We trim some profit, and then we just hold some runners and, you know, collect the rest of the profit along the way. All right. So semiconductors. I mean, not much to talk about here when it comes to semiconductors. They always look strong. Okay. MU. Apparently MU crushed earnings, and then it just gave everything back. That is devastating. That's devastating. I would hate to be in that trade. This is why earnings is just so annoying. I mean, you think you have an idea, and then that's brutal. It's very brutal. But yeah, MU pretty much gave his whole move back. I don't think this is a. I don't think MU is going to like tank from here. If anything, I think MU is going to probably is faking. I think it's faking bears out. I mean bulls out, and then it's going to continue to the upside. We'll see. All right, we'll see. But I don't have much for MU while I was doing this. All right, VIX. So VIX has broken below 17. Yeah, it's broken below 17, so it's very much possible that the VIX can head a little bit lower here. It's at another resistance level. I mean, not resistance, support level here, right? 1670, and then after that you're looking at about 1650. So you're starting to get into this very tight range with the VIX. Like I said before, once the VIX gets between 17 and 16, you want to be careful. Okay, you want to be careful because in the past it has a habit of spiking within this range, at least for this year. Here bounced off 17, here it bounced off 17, here it went as low as about 16, bounced from there. So VIX is getting very close to that critical zone. I mean, it's pretty much in a critical zone, but once it starts getting to that 16 level, do what you want. I would just say be very much careful, guys. Be very, very careful. All right, so I think that's it. Okay, I do think that's it. So I think Bitcoin, I think I showed this in the Discord. Maybe I showed it in a video, but Bitcoin has this massive bull flag here, and it's playing out so far. All right, so if Bitcoin manages to break out of this bull flag, I mean, you're talking about some insane levels, but we won't talk about that until that happens, or if that happens. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. In conclusion, guys, semiconductors look great. Okay, semiconductors look absolutely beautiful. They look very, very strong. If Nvidia continues to pump towards the upside, I do think 160, 170 is on the table. So pay attention to Nvidia tomorrow. Pay attention to the news tomorrow as far as GDP. Trump has warned that Iran and Israel might, start boxing again, whatever the case may be. Again, that stuff isn't long term to me, or short, even intermediate term. So I wouldn't pay attention to war that much, or let war fearmonger you too much. But as long as Nvidia stays above this area right here, these guys right here at around 153, it's very much possible that you could see a move much higher towards 160, 170. All right, if Nvidia just so happens to tank before open, or even at open, right, let's say Nvidia gets below 153 and holds, then I would say hold off on calls. All right, that's just me. Do what you want. But if Nvidia can stay above this area, and I say if Nvidia can manage to get above 155, I do think 160 and 170 is on the table, and obviously the market will follow along. As far as the SPY and triple Qs go, all right, when we're talking about a top or a potential top, SPY can head as high as 620, 630, right? Short term, we're looking at about 610, 613, somewhere around that range, okay? But as far as all-time highs, I would say 630, minimum 620 if we're being humble. But while you're in this area, you want to pay attention to, mainly you want to pay attention to semiconductors. They have been leading the way when it comes to all-time highs or even previous highs, right? Pay attention to semiconductors. Pay attention to NVIDIA. More importantly, just pay attention to NVIDIA. All right. You can even pay attention to Apple as well. I think Apple is a sign that something is coming, but pay attention to SPY, pay attention to triple Qs, pay attention to NVIDIA. All right. More than anything. If semiconductors are starting to tank, if NVIDIA is giving up that key level of 153, I would say be neutral. But if NVIDIA gets back below 150, you might want to start looking at that possible dip scenario. All right. SPY obviously is going to follow what semiconductors are doing. Triple Qs obviously is going to follow what semiconductors are doing. Plain and simple, semiconductors has been leading the way. I think we understand that. If you don't want to pay attention to semiconductors, maybe you don't trade semiconductors. If you are a VIX trader, I know a few of you are, pay attention to VIX between 16 and 17. If VIX gets as low as 16, I would be hands off. Okay, I would be hands off when it comes to calls. All right. So you still have a little bit more potential upside, downside here when it comes to the VIX. Obviously, the market would do inverse of that, but I will be hands off when it comes to the VIX. I will be very much careful when it comes to the VIX once it gets as low as 16, or if it gets as low as 16. Regardless, as long as it stays within this range, I will be cautious. I will trim contracts, right? I will take profit when I can. I would just hold some runners, and if those runners end up being break even, I would just close on break even. Do what I got to do. So hopefully that all makes sense, guys. My last video still stands. Be cautious. You haven't broken any key levels towards the upside. NVIDIA is like the main thing, the only thing that's really made new highs in regards to the market. The SPY right back where it started. Triple Qs right back where it started. You're a few points up. I guess that's great, 541 on the triple Qs, but ultimately it's not really saying much. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts. And until the next video, traders, have a good one.